Welcome back to Cody in the Cinema, and today I have two recommendations for you. Stories about young girls growing up and how they deal with learning about what it's like to have to deal with very adult problems. And the first is a film that went way under the radar in 2022. I saw this in Charlottesville on a rainy day, and my group, we were alone in the theater, and I'm glad we were because all of us were emotionally distraught by this 2022 masterpiece, The Quiet Girl. It's a simple story about a young girl who lives in Ireland, a small town. Her mother is having another child. The father is useless. The family can't support this poor girl. And she's very quiet. She doesn't advocate for herself. She's reserved. And so she kind of gets brushed off for a summer on this other family, Eileen and Sean. And it kind of is one of those things where it takes some time for everyone to get used to each other, although Eileen is very accepting of this girl. Sean at first struggles, but he grows sort of a relationship with her as well. And this is one of those movies that's shot confidently with a quiet sort of beauty. It's content to allow its actors to take their time developing relationships. And it really is just this awesome story about how good-natured people can come together and sort of make their own family. When I was going back and looking at scenes of this again, and this reminded me of like a Bresson movie, just sort of the emotional weight of it. It's also a story about, learning as a child to deal with something embarrassing that you don't want to have to deal with. Like, you spill milk on yourself, maybe you wet the bed, uncomfortable conversations, especially for a child who doesn't like to speak very much. So if you haven't seen this picture, it's a tearjerker. Bring the tissues. I really cannot believe that this one did not get more press, because as far as I'm concerned, it's basically the best picture of the last decade. I love this thing so much. I was recently watching a movie that's not an acting kind of drama, not strictly that sort of flavor. It's a folk horror drama thing called Celia from the late 80s. And this is in that All That Haunts pack from Severin. I talked about this in my first video. In this particular movie, it's not set in Ireland anymore. Now we're in Australia. We're in a suburb, not a remote farm, like in the first movie I discussed. And right away, Celia, this young girl, has to deal with the death of a close relative. And she's really struggling with this. She's actually seeing these creatures that she learns about in a children's book that she is a fan of called the Hobyahs. And they're like this blue creature that, you get the idea. And she's scared of these things, but she meets these new neighbors, the Tanners, who are so nice to her and their mother especially. And she kind of gains these makeshift friends. And they have this like creepy mask that, there's a scene in there that I was thinking to myself, like, did Majora's Mask like straight up rip off parts of this movie, the Nintendo 64 game? And it is kind of a drama. There's some political stuff in there. There's some stuff about animals that's pretty intriguing, and the rights of animals. And like I said, it's not overtly a horror film for the most part. There are some parts where it really leans into that part of the genre, and you will remember that when that happens. But even though, so Celia is much more headstrong, much more of an extrovert. She has no problem standing up for herself, and she's very different from the girl from Cait in the last picture I discussed. However, both are dealing with very similar life experiences, okay? Both are learning that adults aren't perfect. Both are learning to accept circumstances beyond their control. They're both dealing with some subject matter that's some of the most difficult stuff you could deal with as a young child, and the loneliness and the isolation and the fear that these girls feel. I mean, it's going to touch you in a place that's so unique to cinema, because you can see what happens, from the adult lens if you're watching as an adult, but it's going to be something that if you watch either picture or both, you're going to really go back in time to being a small child. And for both of these movies, they're going to make you sad, but they're so worth seeing, especially if you have, a young girl in your family, a daughter, something like that. I strongly suggest seeing both these films. You will have subtitles with The Quiet Girl. You will not with Celia, if you usually watch movies in English. So I recommend both of those to you. What are your thoughts on these pictures if you've already seen them? Until next time, I'm Cody in the Cinema. Thanks for tuning in.